yeah, you got to go back. Yeah, you should do that thing after we do this. But you need to close that for now. So yeah, y'all need. There's Chromebooks. Yeah, go ahead. They're distracting. So here's the thing. Some of you might notice your grades dipped because instead of putting your zeros in as zeros, I waited until you got it in. Therefore, it wasn't counted into the calculation you might saw a
Can I see
couple
my
days ago.
grade?
But well, I'll let you have some time in a minute. So yeah, make sure you check that. If for some reason your grade is super low, you might need to talk to me about it. But you know if you haven't done anything, and if you don't know if you haven't done anything, it sounds like you need to like figure out a way how to keep track of your stuff better. All right, so it is April the 16th, and hey folks, we're going to go through a little bit of our Geography Unit 1 slides again, but please keep in mind that I have posted that project for you. If you have a question about your project, go ahead and email me. I've been replying to those who have so far. This is going to be due in a couple of weeks. I want to make sure it's in before we start our EOCs. Especially like you ninth graders, y'all take like what, 3 total, right? You'll take biology.
One.
Yeah, we took one.
We got 2 more, right?
No, I took one. I only took one this year.
Who's special?
Man, that is special. That's totally special. But you're gonna have to make up later, right?
No, just for the one of them.
Just for one of them. Okay. Hey, that's all right. So yeah, make sure you're doing that. Make sure your grades are in. Progress reports come out today. Jaden, got to close that Chromebook. Let's go. All right. So last time we ended off, we were talking about different climate types. Nothing new to y'all. This is the type of thing that you've picked up in the life sciences as well, and what we call the physical sciences here. Like they hammer this into your head over and over again here in Texas in the state curriculum. It comes up a lot. Easy stuff, though. So, all right, world population. So let's talk a little bit about demographics. Whenever we talk about different countries and different continents in the future, we're going to talk about population growth rate, birth rate, and the death rate. And so these are things that you can also keep on something called the actuarity tables. I think that's how you say it. And that shows the proportion of death rate and birth rate. Surprisingly enough, even after COVID, the worldwide death rate hasn't really changed. So that's a very strange thing to think about at a pandemic, but it seems like either the birth rate's keeping up or the cause of death is changing, or something like that. So you see here that one thing that we find in developed countries is that the birth rate tends to slow down, and the death rate, the age of natural death increases. Now that brings us to this next term, natural increase. When population grows at such a rate that resources can keep up. So natural increase essentially is population growth. It's how it happens when people have it of their own accord without outside influences such as like immigration. So if you have a country with a large natural increase, that means people tend to have large families with a high birth rate without what we call infant mortality. So a high infant mortality rate is something you might find in developing countries, such as much of sub-Saharan Africa. Doubling time, how long it takes for the population of a region to double. This isn't used very often. This is one of those things that you might find if you're doing historical research in a country, especially to see how quality of life changes. So like I was talking about Africa. And so there have been quite a few things that's actually helped lead to the population growth of sub-Saharan Africa. For one is the introduction of sweet potatoes to replace yams. Another is the introduction of bananas and plantains. And another is actually activities from charity organizations, whether they're international aid or if they're missionary groups, doing things like providing like vitamins, wells, medicine, and even things that like baby formula Like that baby
Okay.
formula has
What
been
are
a
the colors on each country?
Oh, for this one, I don't know. They use it back there. It has something to do with population, but just like looking at it, I mean, all right. So we see 45 plus in a lot of the sub-Saharan African countries, so the dark red, and we see in places like Russia and a lot of Europe there, we see it's blue, like a dark blue, 0 to 10. So what do you think those numbers could mean?
Infant
No idea.
mortality rates.
Okay. I mean, well, so you,
They don't have as many children. Europe has a problem with that, especially. And I know in Russia, the population is almost completely stagnant.
I know in Japan it's shriveling up. So in Italy too. In Japan and in Italy, they pay parents to have kids. Like they're really trying to incentivize it because their natural increase is so low. There's some countries it doesn't come to mind, but they're actually offering like paid some of the Scandinavian countries they're offering like just like half a year long paid leave to mothers who have babies. This is something that's a lot of countries see as demographic problems. Some people seek to offset it by human migration, by like bringing in people from other parts of the world. But some people criticize that because that can be a big cultural change within your country as well.
I like how Ottawa is just blue.
So what?
Ottawa is just blue in the middle.
Yeah, I really wish I knew the context that whoever made this slide set didn't put notes in it. And so I mean, I don't know if this is by the thousands, the 10,000s. We can guess. We do know definitely for several reasons though,
Persia.
the demographics of these countries are going to be very different than that of this country. In this country. So we're not sure why though. I mean, why? Like, what is it measuring? What's it measuring?
How cold it was, but that one takes sense.
Well, we know that, like, say, the birth rate between these African countries and America is different. They have a very high birth rate, but they also have a high infant mortality rate. Not a lot of their babies make it. Jaden, I need you to close that. So, like, all the way, please. There you go. So, I mean, this is one of those things, right? We know that also the life expectancy for these countries is much lower as well. Yeah.
Not that that's easy.
It probably is. Well, you see some country lines that are on.
You can sit down.
Oh, well, it's one of those things. I mean, this was, if I had to guess, I'd say this was made, it was probably made 15 years ago, but they probably used a map that was older than that. I don't know. That's the thing about free stuff. Developed countries, but my history stuff I make on my own. Developed countries have a higher standard of living. Well, I mean, that's true at a material level. And you could say that also as far as like just amenities and things like that. They make most of their income from secondary and tertiary economic activities. They have what they mean here is you're talking about people who make a lot of their cash doing jobs that are, we might call like either the service industries, or we could call them like manufacturing, things like that. Like upper level manufacturing. They have a low birth rate, a low death rate, long life expectancy. Small percentage of the population is under 15. The reason behind that is because since people live longer, like if you have, if your life expectancy in your country is like 75, that means most of the people in your country are old because you have to make it pretty high in order to change that average. They have a high literacy rate. So this has to do with education. This is a worldwide phenomenon, and it's one of those things. Being able to read isn't just something that you might find that's a cultural thing. This is something that cultures around the world, it's a mark of education, is the ability to read and to read well. Low infant mortality. In America, almost all the babies make it. That's great. I mean, like last year, we had a field trip for one of my classes, we went to the hospital to go see the maternity ward where they deliver babies and stuff like that. And so some of the nurses and the doctors talked with us about how, like, even for like very sick or very premature children, they're able to do a lot to save their lives, right? You had a question? I thought you had your hand up. Low per capita GDP. So that's gross domestic product. So gross domestic has to do with how much money does your country make on average. So there.
We make a lot of money.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's funny how you calculate it because it can change. It's one of those things I don't like it because it's one of those things that you can change your input and your definition of it to suit what's best for you. I personally think you need to offset it by the amount that you borrow and the amount that you spend and try to look for either an increase or a decrease overall average. Yes, sir.
North Korea has a literacy rate of 100%.
Well, what?
North Korea has a literacy rate of 100%. Does that make them a developed country?
I'm sure they say that. But the thing is, too,
By the way, it's like this year.
here's one thing that's always bothered me about that, and say like IQ testing and SAT testing, because like China blows us out of the water on their SAT scores and their intelligence scores. However, they have whole communities of people still live like they're in the Middle Ages. You know, they're like serfs. They get no education, and so the only ones they test are the ones who go to these really awesome schools, but they're like living there. You know, that's their life. You know, they see their family only on like vacations and stuff. Like my wife has a very good friend, and she just came in from China, and oh my gosh, the way she described school that she went to there was very different than here. You know, like my education experience has only been in America, but like she would describe it as things were super strict, and it was all day, every day. You know, and the students never even thought about talking on the school grounds at all. Like at all. It was complete silence the whole time, except
Subway.
for the instructor who's talking. Well, I mean, it's the thing is like, well, what was I saying? I mean, like the last thing they wanted to do was to live in one of those peasant communities where they're working like manual, hard labor the rest of their lives, no education and no way. This is how you make it in the world, how you make money and things like that. And have creature comforts later in life, it's like an investment. So they had reasons to do it. I mean, everybody makes sacrifice. I mean, going to college, you're going to have, if you go to college, you're going to make sacrifices because you might have, guys, your friends might want to play video games or they might want to go out and party. But you might need to make that sacrifice to not do that so you can study, so you can wind up passing. Maybe have a good job or a better job, at least a job where you're not breaking your body down, you know, or something like that. Or even if, you know, like, and it's not just college, it's military. If you're working in any kind of job, if you make those sacrifices to do your best to please your boss and your clients, your customers, you're going to find that you're going to do better, you know. I mean, it's just how it is. We all have to make sacrifices for the future. And it can be little ones. It doesn't mean you have to really lose something. It just means you put off comfort. There's a lot of studies from psychologists that show that people who are able to delay gratification, that means don't do something that makes you happy now. Put it off. Do it later. Do what you have to do now instead. You're going to do better in life as far as income, depression, marriage and family, all that stuff. You're just going to, it's like it correlates well with doing better in life. If you can put off happiness for now, not get drunk and stuff like that. All right, so developing countries. These are countries with lower standard of living. They make most income from primary economic activities. So this can be from what we might call the extraction industries. So like extraction industries are like this. Your country has natural resources. Because your economy is not that great and you might not have a lot of factories that can use it, instead of using it in your own factories and your own industries, you sell it to other countries. So this can be agricultural products. You find a lot of developing countries have that. It can also be things like metals, rare earth metals, petroleum, stuff like that. Like you see here in the deep red, like a lot of Africa, like a lot of African countries essentially have other nations come in and like do things like mine their resources and stuff like that.
No, they might have to we steal.
Well, in some cases, yeah. Like you take electric cars, for example. Electric cars, their batteries need a lot of cobalt. Cobalt's a rare earth metal. A lot of it comes from the Congo, and that stuff is literally dug up by little children in these little caves with crude tools, and then it makes its way to first world countries to be developed.
Some of them take it, but like they're so desperate to get at least a little bit of money that they'll take the lowest amount of payment just.
Yeah. Diamonds are like that too in some places. And Africa is very rich in what we call rare earth metals. So they're called rare earth because they're hard to find, but we use a lot of them for things like super processors and things like that, like your smartphone and stuff. I mean, so it's very valuable, but it's rare, and so you get it from places like this. All right, they have low per capita GDP. They have high birth rate. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there having babies, but the problem is they also have a high infant mortality rate. Not a lot of them make it. But like I told you, places like Africa have had that lessened due to things like medicine, and also one of the biggest life increasing things for babies in these countries has been people shipping in formula, because often the mothers are malnourished and they can't provide a lot of milk for the babies. But also sugar salt mixtures. One of the biggest killers in the world to this day is dysentery. And so whenever you have dysentery, you can face organ failure because your body gets so dehydrated. You keep throwing up or diarrhea until you die of it. Your organs shut down. Well, one thing that saved a lot of lives is people send a lot of these folks like a mixture of salts, like electrolytes and sugar, kind of like Gatorade, right? And so you give this to the babies and you give it to people who have dysentery, and it can really save their life. And so that's why, like, if you go to the hospital, they'll give you an IV because they know that having fluids and retaining that in your body is so important if you have dehydration. So also low literacy rates. Yeah, so education, either by choice or accessibility, isn't there. High percentage of the population under the age of 15. Yeah, there's a lot of babies being born, but people don't make it to old age that well because they have a high death rate, right? And so, so like even the way that like African people I've met, the way they think of death is different than we do. Because here in America, death it's tragic, but it's kind of sterile compared to like third world countries. Whereas a lot of times here in America, we have somebody pass away and people mourn for it in the family and we have a burial. But in some of these places, death is kind of more common to see somebody growing up die, even violently. So they don't think of death the way that we do here. They've seen it before, and they've seen it many times. So it's traumatic, but people learn to deal with it, I think is the way to put it. All right, last one for today, population distribution. Population distribution is uneven, as you've seen in that map. But it's not just birth rate and death rate. Many things affect this, including environmental issues and human issues. Remember, we talked about not a lot of people live in places with not a lot of water. Not a lot of people live in places that are very mountainous. More people tend to live along coastlines. That's a normal thing. It's a normal pattern of living. Factors in distribution. Natural resources: oil, arable land, water. So arable land is land that's farmable. Like I told you, people tend to live in places where you can grow crops, even if you don't use it for crops. Climate: hot, cold, wet, dry. So now back to natural resources: oil. Oil is one of those things that can make an area, because of the money it brings in, you can import a lot of the resources you need. And so that brings in enough money, and money is very good about, helping you live better. Economic development. So that, as we've seen, that can affect things. Government policy. And so this is like, we're just talking about how people are trying to incentivize people to have babies. Whereas in some places, like we were talking about China, we have
Really?
Yeah, literally.
You really have to be
Roblox.
yeah,
man.
don't worry, the lightning's not in here, it's outside.
How do you know? Maybe it's like sneaking in and
Then
Oh, I thought that
I
was
would
cool.
question everything. Well, the thing is, so like in China, they have a very high male population because culturally they want to have boys, but for a long time, they've had what's known as the one-child policy, to where it was strongly encouraged that you only have one child as a couple, as a family. Otherwise, the child was aborted, or they would have to secretly give it up to adoption so they could try again.
Is it really encouraged?
Well, the thing is, like, you could do it, but some people, it depended on what time frame. There were time frames where the parents would be put in jail. Then later on, it softened up where you weren't put in jail, but you might have things like you might get fined, or you might get fired from your job and things like that. So it was like it was strong pressures. It was still strong pressures. Yeah.
They did that because large reliable population growth.
They-
loosen restrictions because
Yeah.
stagnating to the point where they wanted now it's child policy.
And they did recently increase that. Yeah, and China has been known even back in even like this summer I read Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, right? And he wrote that in 1776. And even back then he wrote on how China just had a massive population.
China's always
Massive.
historically had a massive workforce.
Yeah.
Resources, whatever, it's always been a trade center.
It has been. Yeah, people have been very jealous of the wealth of China for a very long time, even back then. But back then as well, like even Adam Smith, he wrote on they didn't really value individual life though. So there was a lot of
Many
lives,
people do.
but didn't really value.
You need people to value every single person.
Well, I don't want to be that cynical because I don't believe it. I don't believe it in my experience and the experience of the around. But I think people can be as long as they're safely disconnected enough. But I think once it becomes real enough, it changes. Then I don't know if it's more emotional level or what.
If they
Or,
had a smaller population, they'd most likely not get individual license.
well, I mean, at a utility, utility wise, yeah, because then every life would be more tragic. And like if there was only 3 people on Earth, if one of those people died, it would be like overwhelming. It would. I mean, it would. So yeah, I understand that at that point. All right, so back to this. Let's finish this up. So, rural urban settlement. Less people live in rural areas. I mean, I think we all know that. More people live clustered in cities, especially now in a modern world. Before modernity, though, before industry, most people lived in the country, in rural areas, because most people were farmers. Capital resources, transportation, technology, these things can help out with your life. Conflicts, refugees. Yes. So we've known in the past 20 years in particular, well, okay, maybe. Okay, like we had the migration crisis of just about almost 10 years now, I think. Especially ever since the U.S. pulled out of Iraq, things were very unstable. And the instability, in some ways, was allowed and provoked on. And so a lot of countries fell apart even harder. And so a lot of people had to leave war zones because of newly emerging civil wars, pulls for power. Migration, movement of the people. I mean, migration happens for many reasons. You can have push and pull factors. So push factors push you out of a place. And pull factors pull you into a place. So you might get pushed out of an area because there's no jobs. But you might be pulled to a new place because it's a safer neighborhood. So you can find this within micro migration, like within the borders of your country and in and out of your country. Urbanization, people leaving rural country areas to go live in urban city areas. Once again, this is something that really happens when a country industrializes. People move into the cities. However, you see one thing, some people speculate that places like America, as you need less, as we have less and less industry, but more and more people able to work from home, there could actually be like a de-urbanization where like people just kind of spread out and get to work from like out in the country and suburbs. Because it's like, why would you live in the bustling city if you could just stay where you can be more comfortable and make the same money?
Darn it. More
So, I mean,
environmental damage.
personally, I like to live where I can't see neighbors, where it's just tree, deer, tree. But
I live like that. I like
it's
to
nice. I like to visit, but I don't want to stay there. I don't like having neighbors. Like I grew up without neighbors. I can't stand the idea of having neighbors. I don't know.
A province in
All right, kids, that's gonna end it for today. See you tomorrow.
Everybody
Oh no, Monday.